Hello everyone, welcome to yet another session of the daily news analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our understanding from the examination point of view. So let's start today's discussion by taking the important articles featuring in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper. So let's take up our first article for the day. The first article which appears in the newspaper reads, "The mandatory requirements for packaged commodities." Now, this particular article appears in the newspaper in the backdrop of the amendment that are promulgated by the Consumer Ministry. So, what are these amendments and where these amendments are being made forms the part of our discussion. So, the Department of Consumer Affairs, which is in the Consumer Affairs Ministry, and the Legal Metrology Division of this department has notified a draft amendment to the Legal Metrology Packaged Commodities Rules of 2011. So, these are the rules which are sought to be amended by the Legal Metrology Division, and they have put out this amendment. And now, as the process goes on, if there is any amendment that is notified to any law, it will first go for public consultation. People will give, the stakeholders of the industry will give their opinions on it, and after their opinions are taken, this amendment can then be finalized. So, what is this Legal Metrology Packaged Commodities Rules? What are these rules? So, this particular article as well as these particular rules pertain to the packaging of our products. All of us in our daily life buy a lot of packaged products, be them ready to eat food products or other packaged food products, and these food products, as we know, have the labels attached to them, and these labels feature all kinds of attractive imagery and their brand information in their majority part of the label, and a very small part of those labels we see is granted to the vital information with respect to those products as to what is the manufacturing date and expiry date of the product, what is the net quantity of the product, what is the nutritional information if there is any required in the product. All these information we see is there at the back of these products in very sort of small letters, and those kind of information they give it in one can say at the back side of the labels. So even this information, it was made mandatory for these manufacturers, these makers of these products under the Legal Metrology Packaged Commodities Rules. These rules were those rules which made mandatory for these companies to give this vital information about their products at the back of their label, which should be visible to the public. And now certain amendments are being made to these rules as well, which means that these rules are sought to be modified to make the consumer experience and their experience of buying the products more wholesome, and their right to be informed, which is a very important right. To uphold that right, more amendments are being proposed. So we'll take a look at what are these rules, what do they exactly protect, and what are the new amendments that are added now. So these rules, as we saw, it regulates pre-packaged commodities in India, and inter alia mandates certain labeling requirements prior to sale of such commodities. So these are the rules which make it mandatory for those companies to give out that vital information. So for example, to give you an example, if we buy a can of beverage, let's say any beverage, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, any kind of beverage or other kinds of beverage, these beverages have a lot of sugar in them. Now, given a chance, they might not publish this information, what kind of ingredients are added to these beverages, but there's a lot of added sugar, as I said, and due to the requirements under these rules to give out the information under these products. So if you look at the product label of the Coca-Cola or other beverages closely, it is written how much is the quantity of added sugar. Added sugars would be those sugar which is artificially and externally put in the product. So this they have to put out so that the consumer of that product knows how much of the added sugars is in the product and how much is he or she consuming. So how is this made possible for these companies to adhere to? From these rules, legal metrology and packaged commodities rules. So as we can see, these rules are very necessary for the consumer's welfare and their right to be informed about what they are buying and what they are consuming. So the main aim of these rules is to establish and enforce standards of weights and measures, regulate trade and commerce in weights, measures and other goods which are sold or distributed by weight, measure or number or any other matter that is connected to the same. And according to the Act, the central government may appoint a director for legal metrology to perform duties related to the interstate trade and commerce. So these are the rules of 2011, and which act are they flowing from? The Legal Metrology Act of 2009 is the parent act which deals with all kinds of provisions with respect to this issue, and under the act a director can be appointed who can perform the duties related to the act, and the state government may appoint a controller of legal metrology to perform duties related to intrastate trade and commerce. Right? These are the important points with respect to what are the provisions with respect to the Legal Metrology Act. Now let's come to the part where what kind of protections or declarations do the companies of or manufacturers of these products need to ensure. So the rules make it mandatory to ensure a number of declarations such as the name and address of the manufacturer, packer, importer. So therefore we see for any product that we are buying or consuming, the name and address of the manufacturer and the packer or importer is mentioned on the product. Then the country of origin. If there is a product which is originating from outside of the country, so that country of origin should be mentioned. Then the common or generic name of the commodity. So the naming of the commodity makes a big difference. So therefore it makes necessary for the packer to give a generic name if there exists for the product to name it in the label. Then the net quantity, how much quantity the product is having, the month and year of the manufacture of the product as we see, therefore the information is mentioned in the label. Then the maximum retail price of the product and consumer care information. Now consumer care information also becomes a very vital part, because what is supposed to be the way to use the product, that becomes a part of consumer care. If there are any caveats or if there are any warnings that the product manufacturer should give, which is that people with allergy should not consume such a product. So that kind of consumer care information also needs to be given in the label. Then all pre-packaged commodities should also be inspected. So inspection of the commodities also happens under these rules. So these are the mandatory declarations that the manufacturers, packers or importers of the product should paste it at their label. Right. So this was going on. Now what are the new amendments that are being proposed? So as we know that current form of regulation, how it happens, these information is mentioned, but it is mentioned at the back of the labels, and they are mentioned in a manner where not everyone would focus on them or read about them in a detailed manner. So in order to again enhance the level of protection and uphold the right to be informed for the citizens, new amendments are being proposed to these rules. And what are these new amendments? So the key amendments are that first of all, the information which is very vital to the product would be first pasted on the front side of the product, the front side of the label. So the back side information requirement is being changed, and all the vital information would be pasted on the front side of the product. And what information? So the key constituents need to be mentioned on the product packaging. So if there is any product which has a key constituent, which has a parent constituent which forms the base of the product, that key constituent needs to be mentioned on the front side of the label, because it is common for consumers to assume that brands' claims are accurate, but such claims are usually misleading. That is why it is necessary that what product they are selling and the key constituent of that product, it needs to be mentioned first, and that too on their front side of their label. Then the front side of the package must contain the percentage of the composition of this unique selling proposition, right? So by mentioning the key constituents, it makes the manufacturer more responsible to show and tell what product they're using. Then not just this product and constituent which they're using, if it is in the majority part, then the percentage should also be mentioned in the package on the front side. For example, if a brand sells aloe vera moisturizer or almond milk or biscuits, then the maximum percentage of the product should be aloe vera and almond. And right, this is to ensure that the product name is not misleading. That is why whatever is the product, the key constituent and how much percentage of that key constituent has been used in the product, all of this should be mentioned on the front side packaging of the product. So these are the additional changes that have been made into the rules, which become important not just from the examination point of view, but also from a general awareness point of view, because consumers' rights are very important rights, and in the wake of all kinds of adulteration practices and malpractices that go on in the manufacturing of pre-packaged and processed foods, it's important that these stringent protections and safety measures for the consumers and everyone are ensured. So this was a discussion on this article, and let's move on to the next article now. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, "Time for a joint space exercise." Now this editorial appears in the newspaper in the backdrop of the Indo-US military exercise that is happening. So India and the US will be undertaking joint military drills in October in the city of Auli in Uttarakhand. Now Auli is at an altitude of 10,000 feet and some 95 kilometers from the line of actual control. So can we understand the importance of this military exercise over here, where US as a ally for India is coming and participating in a region which is similar to the battleground where India and China are facing a standoff in the Ladakh region, which is a hilly mountainous region, and in such a high altitude region in the state of Uttarakhand, India and US will be participating in a joint military exercise. So this is the context with which the authors draw their perspective from, and say that if India and US are coming together to hold a joint military exercise on land, the time is now ripe for the inaugural India-US joint space military exercise. So they make a case for India and US coming together to hold a joint space military exercise, and they give a lot of reasons, scenarios and the challenges that can come in conducting such an exercise. So let's take a look as to why the time is ripe for India-US joint space military exercise. So first of all, the authors feel that India and US are perfect partners for such kind of space collaboration, because in 2019, the US stood up to its Space Force as a branch under the Department of the Air Force, which meant that US was the first country in the world to designate a part of its armed forces as the Space Force. It became the world's only independent Space Force at that point of time, right? So US already has the distinction in taking steps forward in militarization of the space, or making sure that it has a military presence in the space affairs, right? And therefore we can see that space has now become a military domain as much as land, water, air and cyber. Already these were the old domains, land, water, air. These were the traditional domains where military face-offs we have seen in history. Cyber had come in, and cyber warfare is now the new area where countries face off, and now space has also been established as a new military domain, and that is why US steps to establish its first Space Force. Has India also taken some efforts in this direction? India also has taken efforts where it was successfully demonstrated the Mission Shakti. What was Mission Shakti? It demonstrated the anti-satellite technology, and it conducted an anti-satellite missile test in 2019, wherein it showed that if there is any satellite hovering in space in the orbits, India has the capacity to destroy that satellite. Hence the term anti-satellite missile test. These missiles would be destroying the satellites of other adversary countries if India feels so. So this was a major demonstration of the strength, Indian strength with respect to space warfare. And then in the same year, India conducted its first ever simulated space warfare exercise known as IND-SpaceX, with an eye on Chinese threats. All of this was done precisely because China is also taking steps in terms of space militarization, and that is why India, with a view of not staying behind, it also conducted a similar military exercise for space. So this is what the authors build as a backdrop, that since both countries are taking steps in terms of protecting the space boundaries and protecting their space assets, it becomes important that these countries should come together to hold a joint space exercise. So what should be the reasons for conducting such a space exercise? So authors give many reasons for this. First is that it will push India's defense partnership with USA into a new orbit, literally, right? Current partnership which is going on land front, water front, air front, US is supplying a lot of arms to India. By conducting a partnership in space, military exercise in space, it would again enhance the defense partnership between the two countries. Then second, it will send a strong message to the common adversary, that is China. Both countries at this point of time have their own set of problems with China, and therefore it will send a strong message to them, is what the authors feel. Then it will have other ripple effects for the wider Quad. Quad is, as we know, is the 4-nation grouping of India, Australia, Japan and USA. These this 4-nation grouping is working for the security of the Indo-Pacific region. And if India and US participate in such an exercise, the authors feel that other two countries would also be encouraged to join in such a venture. Then other reason which the authors give, that other countries are already doing it. So for example, France conducted its first space military exercise, Asterix, in 2021. And China, as we know, already is doing this and is marching ahead to the cislunar space, which is the region beyond the geosynchronous orbit, with an ambition to establish a permanent presence on the moon by 2024. So China already has large strides planned ahead to establish its dominance in the space as well. This is what the authors point out as a major reason, that since other countries are already doing it, India should not be staying behind, and it should also ally with other important partners to make sure that it has military presence in the space and has enough avenues for protection of its assets. Because as we know, the space has increasingly seen the presence of sort of important assets which the country has. So it has assets that form the bedrock of the modern economy, such as the GPS system. All the GPS system that we see in the country, through which we are able to use the services of navigation, they are made possible because of the presence of satellites. If the satellites won't be protected, these services can come into harm, and that is why this becomes an important assets which are there in the space. Then telecom networks are possible because of satellites present in space. Early warning systems for various disasters and other things, for missiles, are possible because of the satellites present in space. And weather forecasts are also possible because of these instruments present in space. Therefore, it is very important that all these assets which are there in space, India protects them with the fullest capacities. And this is where the authors make a case that because of all these reasons, India and US should come together and conduct a joint military space exercise. Now, coming to what challenges can come, because if the militarization of space is happening by India and other countries, it does pose certain challenges. So what can be the challenges? First is that it will provoke our eastern neighbor and compel them to draw a new red line. Eastern neighbor is China. It will provoke China. Obviously, any small step that India takes provokes China, and such a step with US is obviously set to provoke China. Then second, our eastern neighbor will use our western neighbor, that is Pakistan, as a proxy state. Any move that we do which China feels that it is contrary or hostile to its own nation, it enhances its efforts, and we have seen that it has taken Pakistan along with it to create a dual front war or a two front wars like situation. Therefore, this particular step, if India takes with US, it is likely to escalate efforts in that direction as well. And third, it will derail the ongoing core commanders dialogue that is going on in Ladakh, right? in Ladakh, currently the standoff which is going on, both countries are trying to peacefully resolve the situation, and if such a step is taken, it might dent those efforts. And fourth, the United States cannot be trusted. This is also a point that the authors point out, that yes, we are cooperating with the US, but they are not a nation, or the party cannot be trusted fully. And then fifth, it will fast track the militarization for space, right? All of these efforts which are taken actually makes the case of militarization of space, the concept of it come into reality, which is not the very best thing to happen for peaceful existence of all nations. So these are the challenges or sort of reasons which the authors give, which come against or come as an obstacle in holding a joint exercise for India and US. But at the end they conclude that yes, these challenges are there. Yes, it can provoke China, or it can increase militarization of space. But the authors feel that since all other countries are already doing it and they're placing their foot forward, India also cannot stay behind. And fortunately or unfortunately, the militarization of space is already happening. And that is why India cannot stay behind, and it should embark with US on a joint military space exercise and other avenues that it should take forward in order to protect our assets of space, right? So with this, we finished the discussion on this article, and let's move on to our next article. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, Army undertakes major infra drive along the LAC, or the line of actual control, in Arunachal. Now this article again features in the newspaper, which is in the context of the standoff that is going on and the hostile relations that are increasingly taking place between India and China, right? We know that in the Ladakh region, India and China are at a standoff. China also is on a lot of, one can say, a spree, a drive on constructing a lot of infrastructure at the Arunachal border as well, because that border is also disputed. So if China is making efforts to increase its infrastructure in the Ladakh region, in the Arunachal region, India is also doing the same. So from the examination point of view, we'll take a look at what are the important locations on this issue, and what exactly are the kind of infrastructures that are being developed by the Union government. So let's first take a look at the location basis for what is happening and where is it happening. So we know that the ongoing standoff is happening in the Ladakh region, and the disputed region is known as Aksai Chin, which the Chinese have held, and India has disputed China's claim, and therefore the clash is going on for this particular region, right? Then this is known as the western sector of India-China border, right? India-China share a long border, of which there are three parts. One is known as the western sector, which comes in Ladakh. One is the central sector, which forms a part of Uttarakhand and other regions. This is considerably a peaceful region between these two countries. And then next is the eastern sector, part of the Arunachal Pradesh, where China lays claims on the parts of Arunachal Pradesh, and India obviously disputes the claim. Why this dispute occurred and why this disputed area exists, we'll try to take a look at that. So the important line over here, which becomes important for us to know, is the McMahon line. Now what is this McMahon line? This particular line which separated Arunachal Pradesh, as we currently know in our Indian map, from the Tibetan region, which is now the Chinese Tibetan region. That line separating these two regions is known as the McMahon line. It is named after the British Indian government, right? It is named after the person who drew this line after the author, Sir Henry McMahon. He was the person responsible for demarcating the boundary between these two regions. So what happened was that India and China share a 3,488 kilometer long boundary, and this entire boundary is disputed, and the line which delineates the boundary between the two countries is popularly called the McMahon line, after the author Sir Henry McMahon. What happened was, in 1913, way before the independence, the British India government had called a tripartite conference in which the boundary between India and Tibet was formalized after a discussion between the Indian and Tibetans. So at that point of time, China did not have the possession of the Tibet region, and therefore an agreement was formed between India and China, and the boundary was demarcated between these two regions, and that boundary was known as the McMahon line. But this boundary came into dispute because China, after acquiring Tibet, did not recognize this boundary and claimed that since Tibet was not a sovereign body, it could not conclude such an agreement, and that is why China does not recognize this boundary line, and that is why it lays claims on the lands of Arunachal Pradesh. This is the genesis of the dispute which exists in the eastern sector or on the McMahon line. What is the issue on the Ladakh region? In 1957, after independence, China occupied the Aksai Chin region, the region which we saw bordering Ladakh, and built a road through it. This episode was followed by the intermittent clashes along the border, which finally culminated in the border war of 1962. Right? This war, as we know, China won the war in a matter of which lasted 32 days, and it was a major setback of India, and this region is therefore occupied by China, and India is laying claim and disputing the claim, and therefore wants a peaceful resolution of this dispute between them. So this is known as the line of actual control. Now, what is the situation right now? We know that both countries are heavily invested militarily in these regions, in the Aksai Chin region as well as in the Arunachal Pradesh region. China, in fact, is heavily arming itself by constructing heavy infrastructure facilities over there, constructing roads, helipads, airstrips, hospitals, makeshift hospitals, all of these things China is constructing. So even India is making sure that it does not stay behind. In fact, China has constructed a set of villages in the borders of Arunachal Pradesh and Tibet. So what is India doing now to combat all of this? This is what forms the part of the article, wherein the article says that India is also upping its game in terms of increasing its capability and infrastructure development in the region. And it is done under 5 verticals. What are these verticals? One is the habitat, which would mean that what kind of services or facilities are you constructing for residents of the soldiers, of the other personnel who would be required in times of a conflict. Then aviation infrastructure, right? Airstrips, helipads, all these facilities and infrastructure which would enhance the presence of the Air Force and the like facilities over there. Then road infrastructure. Obviously, the connectivity in these regions, which is a mountainous region, is very necessary with the mainland regions, and that is made possible by road infrastructure. And constructing roads on these terrain is very difficult, and a lot of tunnels also are constructed in the process. So road infrastructure is another vertical. Then operational logistics, all the logistic part which is required in these processes, and then security infrastructure, right? All the security infrastructure which must be which are necessary in all the processes. There can be a host of security infrastructure that can be constructed. So that is the 5th vertical which the union government is indulging into. So they include roads, bridges, tunnels, habitat and storage facilities, aviation facilities, as we saw, upgrade of the communications and surveillance, especially in the upper Dibang Valley region. Dibang Valley is in Arunachal Pradesh, right? So of these infrastructure projects, who is constructing what? So the strategic roads and border roads were being constructed by the central government agencies and the Border Roads Organization. The Border Roads Organization is a premier organization which is especially established for construction of roads and other infrastructure facilities in the border areas of India. So this organization takes the charge of construction of these services in the border areas, while the army was building the last mile tracks to connect these roads to the forward posts on line of actual control. So the work is divided between the central government and BRO and the army, wherein army takes care of the connecting points from the sensitive areas along the LAC to the other areas. So this is the vital information from this article which we should take note of. And with this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, "Breather for coal plants draws anguish." Now, this is an article appearing in the context of a certain deadline that was given to the coal plants. Coal plants, as we know, are these plants which burn the fossil fuel, burn the coal and generate thermal power, right? So in this process, what happens is that the burning of coal releases a lot of harmful gases, and the set of gases which is most harmful, and India is notorious to sort of produce it in the highest amounts, is sulfur dioxide. And this sulfur dioxide pollution, the Union Ministry is looking to stop it. Everyone is of the opinion that this sulfur dioxide pollution and pollution caused due to excretion of other gases from these coal plants should be stopped. And to stop that, the Union Environment Ministry had given a mandate to the coal plants to install flue gas desulfurization units. Now, what are these units? We'll take a look at them in detail right now. But these flue gas desulfurization units basically are those apparatus which will take the harmful sulfur dioxide gases, break them down and release the gases which are not harmful, right? So these units needed to be installed to curb the extent of sulfur dioxide pollution which exists due to major burning of the fossil fuels from these coal plants. Now, what exactly is happening over these deadlines? Let's take a look. So the Union Ministry had for the first time introduced sulfur dioxide emission limits for coal-fired power plants in December 2015. So the first time such kind of deadlines were issued that before December 2015, all coal-fired power plants should have installed these flue gas desulfurization units. This was the first direction given by the Environment Ministry. But later on, a Supreme Court order changed the deadline for installation of the FGD or flue gas desulfurization technology in power plants from 2017 to December 2019. So first deadline change happened from 2015 to 2017. Then that deadline was changed by Supreme Court to December 2019, and in Delhi NCR till 2022 for other parts of the country. So 2019 was for Delhi NCR and 2022 was for other parts. Now the deadline, as the article tells us, has been pushed to the year 2025. Now this is a grave news that we are looking at, where the important step of curbing the extent of pollution, especially sulfur dioxide pollution, the deadline which was initially set for the year 2025 has now been pushed to year 2025. It is a 10-year push that has been given, which somewhere reflects the ignorance and lackadaisicalness of the authorities to implement this ban, as well as the gross negligence on the part of the coal plants. So this is the crux of the information. Therefore, environment experts have called for strict action on coal power plants, as it is not clear whether power plants will meet even the extended deadlines to comply with the pollution limits both in Delhi and around the country. This is the concern that the environmentalists and other experts are raising. So from this backdrop, let's understand the vital information on this topic. First is, what exactly is this flue gas desulfurization, which the technology and the units which the coal plants need to install in their plants. So flue gas desulfurization is nothing but the removal of sulfur dioxide, which is called the flue gas desulfurization. It seeks to remove gaseous pollutants, that is sulfur dioxide, from the exhaust flue gases generated in the furnaces, boilers and other industrial processes due to the thermal processing, treatment and combustion. So while burning these fossil fuels, whatever sulfur dioxide as a harmful gas is released, this technology or this process of desulfurization actually means to take out that sulfur dioxide, and it is done by various processes, and that process comes under the technology of flue gas desulfurization. So that is the concept of FGD or flue gas desulfurization. Then let's take a look at the extent of sulfur dioxide pollution. What exactly causes this sulfur dioxide pollution? As we are already seeing, the major source for the sulfur dioxide pollution are the burning of fossil fuels. So the largest source in the atmosphere is the burning of these fossil fuels by power plants and other industrial facilities. Smaller sources of SO2 Emissions include industrial processes such as extracting metal from ore. Natural sources are also there. Some natural sources also release sulfur dioxide, such as the volcanoes, locomotives, ships, and other vehicles and heavy equipment that burn fuel with a high sulfur content. So these fuels have high sulfur content, that is why sulfur dioxide is released in their combustion. This is the source of sulfur dioxide. Now the extent, as I said, India is very notorious for the high extent of sulfur dioxide pollution. In fact, according to a report by Greenpeace, which is an environmental NGO, India is the largest emitter of sulfur dioxide in the world, contributing to more than 15% of the global anthropogenic emissions. This is a huge number where India stands at the top of sulfur dioxide emissions. The primary reason is obviously the expansion of coal-based electricity generation. And according to this report, 5 of the top 10 sulfur dioxide emission hotspots from coal and power generating industry across the world are in India. This shows us the gravity or the extent of sulfur dioxide pollution which is being caused and the role played by India and its coal plants in this aspect. So how does this sulfur dioxide pollution affect us? It affects both the human health and environment. Short-term exposures to sulfur dioxide can harm the human respiratory system and make breathing difficult, right? This is increasingly being seen where the prevalence of respiratory diseases have increased, and in fact there was also a report which said that the life expectancy of people living in these highly polluted cities has gone down, and therefore people with asthma, particularly children, are sensitive to the effects of pollution of sulfur dioxide. And these emissions lead to high concentration of sulfur dioxide in the air, generally leading to the formation of other sulfur oxides, and they react with other compounds in the atmosphere to form small particles. And small particles, we know, make way for the PM or particulate matter 2.5 and PM10 pollution, which we have seen how grave the pollution of these fine particulate matter is. So this is the extent of sulfur dioxide which is excreted, which is harmfully sort of supplied in the atmosphere, and what harmful impact it causes in the general sense for the society and the human health. So this was a discussion today on the important articles. We finish here and we'll meet again tomorrow with the important articles from the newspaper. Thank you.